Hello, my dear friends. Tonight, as you settle into a comfortable position and let the day slowly melt away, let us drift together into a world far behind us. A world where life moved slowly, where nights were darker, and where food tasted nothing like what we know today. A gentle journey into medieval times. A calm, quiet exploration of why food for most people was simple, rough, and often disappointing. But don't worry, we will walk through it softly like a dream. No rush, no noise, only slow, relaxing history. Imagine you are standing in a small medieval village sometime around the 12th century. The air feels cool, the ground uneven, the smell of smoke drifting from wooden houses. Life is peaceful here, but harsh. Food is not something people enjoy. Food is simply something they survive on. As you take a slow breath, look around at the world of the peasants. The farmers, the workers, the families who spend every day struggling with the land. Their meals are plain, their flavors are dull. And yet this simple world has a quiet charm, a soft rhythm, almost like a lullaby from the past. Let's walk closer quietly. You see a tiny kitchen hut with a small, uneven fire burning inside. A woman stands over a pot, stirring something thick, dark, and steaming. It isn't delicious. It isn't special. It's just food. This is called pottage, a mixture of whatever vegetables they had, boiled for hours until everything turned into one mushy, flavorless bowl. For many people, this was breakfast and lunch and dinner. Day after day, year after year, a life without taste, but still a life full of quiet endurance. As the fire crackles softly, you can almost hear the slow bubbling of the pot. It is soothing in its own way. The sound of patient cooking, the sound of survival. In this age, food was not about pleasure. It was about filling the stomach so people could work another long day in the fields. There were no spices, no oils, no sugar for ordinary people. Those were luxuries only the rich could afford. Most peasants barely tasted salt. Bread was their main comfort, and even that was rough, dense, and often as hard as wood. But don't let it trouble you. Tonight we are only observing, gently learning, drifting deeper into the stillness of the medieval world. This is history meant to soothe you, not to shock you. So take your time, let your mind settle slowly, like dust resting on an old wooden table. Now imagine stepping outside again. The evening air is cool. Smoke rises slowly from chimneys. Families gather around their small wooden tables. They eat quietly without much excitement, but also without complaint. This was life. Simple, plain, predictable, like the repeating rhythm of a calm old lullaby. As the night grows deeper around us, let us walk softly into the next part of this world. The world of medieval kitchens, strange ingredients, and foods that would feel shocking today, but were simply normal for them. As you take another slow, easy breath, let us gently step deeper into the medieval world, moving toward the heart of daily cooking, the medieval kitchen. Not the kind of kitchen you may imagine today. There were no shiny pans, no metal stoves, no clean shelves lined with spices. Instead, picture a dark, smoky room, a single fire burning in the center, and the air thick with the scent of wood, ash, and whatever simple ingredients were cooking that day. The medieval kitchen was not warm and comforting. It was rough, crowded, and always filled with smoke. When you step inside, your eyes need a moment to adjust. The flickering firelight dances on the walls, revealing bundles of herbs, old clay pots, and wooden spoons blackened from years of use. Everything here feels ancient, worn down, touched by countless hands before you. Near the fire, a pot hangs from a long iron hook. Inside, you can hear a slow, heavy boiling sound. thick, steady, almost hypnotic. This is the sound of dinner. Simple, repetitive, and never truly delicious. Most meals were made from the same things. Some onions, a few turnips, maybe a bit of barley, and if the family was lucky, a small piece of meat to add flavor. But even that meat was often tough, old, and full of fat. It wasn't fresh, tender, or juicy. People ate whatever they could find, whatever survived the seasons. Imagine watching a medieval cook at work. Her movements are slow but steady. She stirs the pot with a long wooden stick. She adds a handful of crushed herbs. She tastes it, not for flavor, but to check if it is edible. She sighs softly, knowing the meal will be the same as yesterday, and the same as tomorrow. Still, this kitchen has its own quiet beauty. The crackling fire, the simple tools, the rhythm of stirring, boiling, and waiting. It all creates a gentle, sleepy atmosphere, almost like a warm hum from the past. Look to the side. You'll notice a rough wooden table. On it sits dark, heavy bread so solid that you could knock on it like a door. Sometimes it tasted sour. Sometimes it was full of grit and tiny pieces of ground stone because medieval flour was never fully clean. People ate it anyway. They had to. There is a calm acceptance in this world. People didn't complain that their food was bland. They didn't wish for luxury. Life was hard and eating was simply another task. Another small moment of survival in a day filled with work from sunrise to sundown. As you listen to the quiet echo of the boiling pot, as the firelight flickers gently in your mind, let yourself drift a little deeper into this peaceful history. There is no rush here, no noise, just slow footsteps through the kitchens of the past. And as the warmth of the fire begins to fade into the cool evening outside, let us softly walk toward another part of medieval eating. Their strange, unusual ingredients, foods that might surprise you, and flavors that would feel shocking today. Let us quietly step forward now, leaving the smoky kitchen behind. The fire crackles softly in the distance as we walk into the cool open air. Take a slow breath and imagine the medieval marketplace unfolding before you. Not busy, not loud, just gently crowded with simple stalls, rough tables, and tired sellers offering whatever they managed to grow, gather, or hunt. This is where medieval people found their food, and this is where you begin to understand why meals were so plain and sometimes unpleasant. Look around you. The market does not shine. It does not sparkle with colorful fruits or fresh vegetables. Instead, imagine muted colors, dusty greens, dry browns, rough textures. Most of the produce looks tired, like it has been in the sun for too long. A few onions, a handful of wilted herbs, maybe a small pile of root vegetables. That was often all the market had to offer. Imagine a woman lifting a turnip from a wooden crate. It is small, uneven, and slightly soft. She turns it in her hands, sighs, and still buys it because she has no other choice. This was the reality. Food existed, but it rarely looked appealing. Move a little further, and you will see something even more surprising: the meat stall. There is no refrigeration, no clean counters, no protective glass. Meat hangs openly in the sun, exposed to flies and dust. It ages quickly, grows tough, and spoils faster than anyone can cook it. But in the medieval world, meat was valuable even when it wasn't fresh. Sometimes people bought parts we rarely consider food today. Organs, heads, feet, stomachs, because they were cheap and could stretch a pot of soup for many meals. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be wasted. And then, there were the creative ingredients, strange things that were sometimes added to food during difficult seasons. A handful of crushed tree bark to thicken a stew, a bit of dried moss to add texture, or old bread soaked in water to make something almost like porridge. But here is the gentle truth. People didn't eat these things because they wanted to. They ate them because they needed to survive. As you walk through the marketplace, imagine the air. It smells faintly of earth, smoke, and animals. It is not unpleasant, just simple, rustic, very real. People move slowly, choosing carefully from what little they can afford. And while this world feels harsh, it also feels calm. There is no hurry, no rushing crowds, just the quiet rhythm of people doing what they've done for generations, buying food to keep their families alive for another day. Pause for a moment. Look around you again. The sky is soft with early morning light. The market is peaceful. The people are tired but steady. There is a gentle acceptance in their eyes, as if they know that life will always be a little hard, but they continue anyway. Now, as we slowly step away from the market, let us move toward something even more fascinating. The medieval seasoning, or rather the lack of seasoning. Why food tasted bland. Why meals felt empty. And how the absence of spices shaped the entire dining experience. As the village sounds fade softly behind us, let your mind drift a little deeper into the quiet truth of medieval flavor. Let us walk together now, slowly and calmly, toward a small wooden cottage just beyond the marketplace. The path is narrow, lined with uneven stones, and the morning light rests softly on the ground. Inside this humble cottage, you will begin to understand one of the simplest reasons medieval food tasted so plain: the absence of proper flavor. Not because people disliked spices, but because spices were treasures beyond the reach of almost everyone. Imagine stepping through the wooden doorway. The home is quiet, dim, and warm. A small clay pot sits on the fire, bubbling gently, sending up a mild, earthy scent. But notice something immediately. The smell is not rich, not deep, not layered with spices the way modern food often is. Instead, it is soft, almost empty, like boiled vegetables and little else. In the medieval world, spices were luxuries carried from faraway places: India, Arabia, Persia, lands most people only heard about in stories. Along the way, merchants risked desert heat, long sea voyages, storms, and bandits. Every step of this dangerous journey raised the price of spices until, by the time they reached Europe, a handful of pepper was worth more than a week's wages for a working family. Cinnamon cost even more. Saffron was sometimes more valuable than gold. And so, ordinary families living in simple wooden homes like this one rarely tasted any of them. Imagine a medieval mother stirring the pot with a slow, tired motion. She adds a pinch of salt, if she has any, because salt too was sometimes expensive. Then she drops in chopped leeks, maybe a bit of cabbage, and one small piece of dried meat saved from the previous winter. The ingredients float quietly, doing their best to create a meal that will fill the stomach, even if it can't delight the tongue. Most meals tasted like this. Plain, soft, watery, sometimes bitter, sometimes sour, never exciting, rarely comforting. And even when people did have spices, they were often stale. Pepper lost its sharpness. Herbs dried out until they became flavorless dust. Everything was a faded version of what it once was. Now imagine sitting beside that clay pot as steam rises slowly. It does not make you hungry in the way modern food does. It simply tells you that something warm is waiting, something that will keep you alive. And in the quiet world of medieval life, that was enough. But spices were not the only problem. The real challenge was that people cooked the same dishes in the same way every single day. Food was not meant to be exciting. It was meant to be reliable. The goal was survival, not taste. Let us take a slow, peaceful breath together as we step back from the pot. Feel the warmth of the fire on your face. Hear the faint crackle of wood. Sense the simplicity of a world where flavor was a rare luxury, something saved for festivals, feasts, and the dinner tables of the wealthy. And now, as the fire softens behind us, let us gently move to the next part of medieval food, one that shaped almost every meal every day. Bread. Not the soft bread you know, but hard, dense, sometimes stale bread that people relied on more than anything else. Let's walk slowly toward that chapter, as the cottage door closes softly behind us. Let us drift now very gently into the quiet heart of medieval life. Bread. Not the warm, soft, fluffy bread we know today with its airy texture and comforting smell. Medieval bread was something entirely different, something heavy, rough, and sometimes so hard that people used it as a plate. Yes, a plate. Imagine you're stepping into a small village bakery at the break of dawn. The sky outside is pale blue and a thin layer of cold mist rests over the ground. Inside the bakery, the warmth of the oven brushes softly against your face. The baker, tired, quiet, moving slowly after waking before sunrise, pulls out loaves one by one. They are dark, dense, thick, the crust so hard that you could knock on it and hear a hollow tap echo back. These loaves were often made from barley, oats, rye, or whatever grain the village managed to harvest. Wheat, the grain used for soft, white bread, was too expensive for most families. Only the rich ate it regularly. The poor ate whatever they could grow. And in harsh winters, those grains were sometimes mixed with beans, peas, lentils, even crushed tree bark when times were desperate. Now imagine holding a piece of this rough, coarse bread in your hands. It doesn't bend easily. It doesn't tear softly. It breaks with a hard, dry crack, sending small crumbs falling like dust. When you chew it, the texture is gritty, almost sandy because the flour was ground between large stone wheels. Small bits of stone often mixed into the flour. Tiny, sharp particles that slowly wore down people's teeth. Many medieval skeletons show teeth ground almost flat because they spent a lifetime chewing bread full of stone dust. That is what daily life tasted like. Some bread was so stiff that people didn't eat it fresh. Instead, they used old stale pieces as trenchers, edible plates. A thick slab of stale bread would be placed on the table, and food would be served on top of it. Stew, vegetables, meat scraps. The bread would soak up the juices and soften just enough to be eaten afterward. Sometimes it was eaten by the family, sometimes given to servants, sometimes given to the poor. But even when it softened, the taste was still plain, earthy, heavy. There was no butter for most people, no honey except on rare occasions, no jam, no warm oven-fresh sweetness, just survival, baked into a dark loaf. Imagine a medieval mother cutting bread for her children. She slices it with slow, steady pressure because the crust is firm and unyielding. She gives each child a piece, knowing it will fill their stomachs even if it brings them no joy. The children sit quietly, eating their bread alongside a thin soup or a cup of watered ale. This was breakfast. This was lunch. This was dinner, day after day, year after year. Now take a quiet breath as you picture this world. A world where bread was not comfort food, but a tool for survival. A world where every bite tasted of labor, of grinding stones, of cracked wheat, of fields that barely produced enough grain to get through winter. And as the smell of the bakery fades softly from your mind, let us walk together to the next corner of medieval eating, a place where things become even more difficult. Spoilage. Because long before refrigerators existed, food went bad quickly, and people had to eat it anyway. Let's move there now, quietly, as the warm oven behind us slowly cools. Now, as we leave the heavy scent of coarse bread behind, let us step softly into another daily struggle of medieval life. Food spoilage, a quiet enemy, always creeping in the background, always reminding people that their meals were never guaranteed. In a world without refrigerators, without sealed boxes, without proper storage, food changed quickly. Meat turned sour, milk curdled, vegetables wilted, fish spoiled within hours unless someone worked desperately to preserve it. Imagine walking into a medieval kitchen on a warm afternoon. The air is thick still and slightly humid. A wooden table stands in the center, holding pieces of meat wrapped in cloth. But the room already carries a faint sour smell, a reminder that the clock is always ticking. If the family does not eat the meat soon, it will spoil. If they cannot preserve it in time, it will be lost. Wasted. Gone. Food preservation was a battle fought with salt, smoke, fire, and hope. But none of these methods were perfect. Salt was expensive. Not every family could afford it. Those who could used it sparingly, rubbing meat with rough grains of salt until their hands felt raw, then hanging it above the hearth. The smoke curled slowly around the meat, drying it out, darkening its color, changing its taste. Smoked meat could last longer, weeks, sometimes months, but it became tough, chewy, and intensely salty. Imagine biting into a piece of this preserved meat. It pulls at your teeth. It tastes almost too strong, as if every flavor has been locked inside and now hits your mouth all at once. This wasn't a delicacy. This was survival food, and everyone knew it. Fish was even harder to keep fresh. People who lived near rivers or coasts woke before sunrise to catch fish because once caught, the clock began ticking immediately. They cleaned it, salted it, or cooked it as fast as they could. Yet even then, the taste was sometimes slightly off, just on the edge of spoiling, but still eaten because there was no other choice. Milk turned sour in a single day, especially in summer, so families quickly transformed it into cheese, butter, or curds. These were not creamy, rich dairy products like today. They were rough, tangy, and often gritty. A sharp smell filled the room as the milk thickened and separated. People got used to these flavors, sour, earthy, strong, because they had to. And fruit. Fruit was a short-lived blessing. A few days of sweetness followed by bruises, softness, and spoilage. Apples shriveled. Berries turned mushy. People dried them when possible, laying them near heat or in thin sunlight. But dried fruit was rare and precious, a treat saved for winter nights. Now picture a medieval mother opening her small pantry, shelves made of uneven wood, jars sealed with cloth and beeswax, a faint smell of old herbs drifting through the air. She inspects each item slowly, carefully, because one wrong choice could make her family sick. Spoiled food was not just unpleasant, it was dangerous. Many people in medieval times got stomach illnesses from bad food. They didn't always know why. They simply accepted it as part of life. And so every meal was a small gamble, a quiet balance between hunger and health. Imagine that feeling. Living each day knowing your food is never fully safe, never fully fresh, never fully guaranteed. With this gentle understanding, let us move deeper into the medieval world, towards something that shaped every bite of food they ate. The lack of flavor, a world where meals were plain, simple, and sometimes painfully boring. And now, as we drift quietly away from the smoky taste of preserved meats, let us step into another gentle chapter of medieval eating, a chapter shaped by the lack of flavor. In our world today, we sprinkle herbs, spices, sauces, and rich seasonings onto everything. A little taste of sweetness, A touch of aroma, a hint of heat. Food feels alive, expressive, colorful, but in medieval times it was different, very different. Meals were simple, plain, often dull, and flavor, real, vibrant flavor, was a luxury only a few could afford. Imagine sitting at a wooden table inside a small medieval home. A clay bowl is placed in front of you. Inside, a thick grayish stew sits still, made from barley, onions, and maybe a few small vegetables from the garden. It smells mild. It tastes mild. Every spoonful feels the same. Not bad, just bland. A quiet taste almost fading as soon as it touches your tongue. This was the everyday meal for most people. No spices from faraway lands. No sugar to sweeten the bitterness. No fragrant herbs to brighten the dish. Just the ingredients grown nearby, cooked the same way, every single day. Salt was precious. Pepper was nearly impossible to afford. Cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg. These were treasures brought from distant lands, so expensive that only the richest families tasted them. For ordinary people, even a small pinch of pepper was something they might never experience in their entire lifetime. Imagine hearing stories about these spices, stories about warm, sweet smells, about flavors that change the whole mood of a dish, and then knowing those stories would never reach your own table. It must have felt like hearing about magic, beautiful but far away. Even herbs that grew in gardens were limited. Thyme, parsley, sage, these existed but not in abundance. People had to choose carefully how to use them, saving them for special meals or healing remedies. Many dishes simply went without them. Bread, too, was plain, made from coarse grains, dark, heavy, and filling, but not particularly enjoyable. Each bite felt dense, as though the bread carried the weight of the entire year's harvest. And so most medieval meals tasted quiet, muted, soft on the tongue but not memorable. Let's imagine a medieval family having dinner at sunset. The room is dim, lit by a small candle. Children sit near the hearth, quietly eating their bowl of pottage, a simple stew they have eaten almost every evening. The father chews slowly, tired from work. The mother serves everyone before taking her own portion. No one comments on the taste. There is nothing to say. The meal is fuel, warm, steady, reliable, but never exciting. This simplicity shaped the rhythm of their lives. People didn't expect food to surprise them. They didn't look forward to dinner for flavor. They looked forward to it because it filled their stomachs, because it kept them going, because it reminded them that they had survived another day. And as we sit with this gentle understanding, let us now drift slowly toward another challenge of medieval food, the struggle of cooking with limited tools. And now, as we leave behind the quiet, flavorless meals of medieval life, let us step gently into another challenge that shaped their food experience, the struggle of cooking with limited tools and difficult conditions. Imagine a medieval kitchen, not the bright, convenient, modern place we know today, but a dim, smoky room with uneven stone floors, a small window, and a single fire burning in the center. There is no gas stove, no clean countertop, no metal pots with smooth handles, no oven with temperature control. Just a fire, a few heavy iron kettles, maybe a clay pot or two, and hands that have learned to work patiently with very little. The smoke rises slowly, curling up toward the ceiling before drifting out through a small hole. It fills the room with a deep, earthy smell, wood, ash, and the faint hint of whatever is cooking. For many people, this smoke settles into their clothes, their hair, even their skin, a constant companion day and night. Cooking over an open fire requires attention. Too much heat, and the food burns. Too little, and it stays raw. There is no precise control, no gentle simmer or steady boil, only instinct, experience, and careful watching. Imagine a woman stirring a pot with a long wooden spoon. The fire snaps softly beneath it. She feels the warmth on her face and the cold at her back. The stew inside cooks unevenly. Hot at the bottom, cooler at the top. She stirs slowly, patiently, hoping it cooks through before the firewood runs out. Most meals were made this way, boiled or stewed, because roasting took too much heat, and baking required a rare luxury, a large communal oven. Bread making was one of the most difficult tasks. To bake bread, people often needed to use an oven shared by the entire village. Imagine carrying a heavy lump of dough down a dusty path, waiting in line behind neighbors, and hoping the oven was hot enough, but not too hot. When it was finally your turn, sometimes the bread burned on the outside, while the inside stayed slightly raw. Yet people still ate it because wasting food was unthinkable. Knives were dull, bowls were simple, plates were wooden, often cracked. Forks barely existed, people used their fingers, which made eating foods like porridge or broth even more challenging. Imagine trying to chop vegetables with a blade that has lost its edge. The pieces are uneven. Some cook quickly, others stay firm and hard. But the meal must be eaten. There is no alternative. Even gathering fuel for cooking was difficult. Firewood was expensive or scarce. Women and children walked long distances just to collect small branches, carrying them home bundled on their backs. Many families cooked only once a day, not because they wanted to, but because they had no more wood. Picture a family sitting around a single bowl, sharing a warm but simple dish, made with tools that barely worked, in a kitchen filled with cold drafts and rising smoke. And as the fire slowly dies down, as the last light of day fades behind stone walls, we begin to see how even preparing a meal was a quiet struggle, a slow routine shaped by humble tools and patient hands. Now, as the night deepens, let us move softly into another part of medieval food life, the scarcity that came with each season. As the hush of night settles deeper around us, let's drift into another quiet truth of medieval life, the way seasons controlled every single meal. Unlike today, there were no supermarkets glowing with fresh produce all year long, no refrigerators, no freezers, no plastic bags to keep food fresh. Every season brought new limits, new challenges, and new ways of eating that people simply had to accept. Imagine standing in a medieval village, feeling the years slowly turning around you. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, each one deciding what would appear on your plate and what would disappear. In spring, the world wakes up slowly. The fields are cool and damp. Tiny shoots of green push up from the earth, but food is still scarce. Winter stores are almost gone. People wait patiently for the first vegetables, fresh herbs, young onions, tender leaves. Meals are light, simple, often small, but after a long winter, even a handful of greens feels like a gift. Then summer arrives, warm, bright, and generous. This is when the greatest variety appears. Berries, beans, carrots, leeks, apples, pears. People gather what they can, drying herbs under the sun, hanging onions in bunches, salting meat, storing grain in wooden chests. They work quietly, knowing that this abundance will not last. Autumn comes with cooler winds, golden fields, heavy harvests, the soft sound of grain being threshed and stored. But autumn also brings pressure, because whatever is not saved now will simply not exist in winter. Women fill jars with pickled vegetables, dry slices of fruit, and seal them with wax. Men clean storage pits, prepare barrels, and guard grain from mice and damp air. And then winter arrives, cold, still, unforgiving. Fresh food disappears from the world, and the landscape turns silent. People rely only on what they preserved. Salted meat, dried peas, hard bread, sometimes so tough you must soak it in hot water to chew it. If a family's stores run low, there is nothing they can do. The fields are frozen. The forests are bare. Hunger becomes a quiet companion. Imagine a winter evening in a small wooden hut, the wind pressing softly against the walls, a small fire burning low because wood is limited, and a simple pot of watered-down stew simmering slowly. It smells faintly of onions, maybe a small piece of pork, maybe dried herbs collected months ago. The family sits together, sharing what remains, hoping it lasts until the next spring. There is a calm acceptance in their faces, a gentle understanding of the seasons, a patience shaped by the rhythm of nature. They do not complain. They simply endure, trusting that warmth will return, and food will once again grow from the soil. Season after season, year after year, this cycle shapes their meals, their bodies, and their daily lives. And as we breathe quietly with them, feeling the slow turning of the year, let us drift gently to the next part of their world, the hidden dangers in medieval food itself. As we move gently into the next chapter, let the night grow a little quieter around us. Let your breath slow, and let your thoughts drift back into those medieval kitchens, where food was not only limited, but often dangerous in ways people simply had to accept. Because in medieval times, food could harm you without anyone realizing why. Imagine a baker in a small village. He grinds grain with heavy stones, the air around him filled with a soft cloud of flour. He does not know that sometimes grain stored too long in damp barns could grow mold, invisible poisonous mold, that mixed into the flour so silently that no one noticed until it was too late. Bread made from spoiled grain looked normal, smelled normal, but carried toxins that caused stomach pain, fever, even hallucinations. Villagers might blame spirits, or curses, or bad luck, never realizing that the problem came from the simple loaf on their wooden table. And then there was meat. In a world without refrigeration, fresh meat lasted only a day or two. After that, it began to spoil. People tried their best. They salted it, smoked it, dried it in the wind. But even then, bacteria grew quietly, invisible and unknown. Sometimes meat tasted strange, or smelled a little off. But hunger left people with no choice. They would cut away the worst parts, cook it in boiling stew, add herbs to hide the flavor, and hope for the best. Imagine a dark winter evening. A family gathers around a pot of stew. Steam rises slowly, thick, heavy, fragrant with garlic and onions. But deep inside the broth is a piece of meat that spent too long in storage. No one can see the danger. They eat quietly, gratefully, because the cold is sharp and food is precious. By morning, someone might wake with cramps, fever, or weakness. They blame the weather or exhaustion, never suspecting that the simple stew was the cause. There were also small hidden threats in the form of animals and insects. Mice slipped into grain stores at night. Insects laid eggs in flour. Sometimes people found a wriggling surprise when they baked bread, but often they found nothing at all. The danger stayed unseen. Even water was uncertain. Wells could become polluted with runoff, rotting material, or animal droppings. A clear cup of water did not always mean clean water. So people often drank weak beer or diluted ale, not for the pleasure, but because it was safer than water. And yet, they lived with this calm acceptance, this quiet understanding that life had risks, and food was sometimes one of them. They did what they could. They prayed over their meals. They trusted tradition, intuition, and the little knowledge passed down by elders. In moments like this, you can almost admire their resilience, the gentle strength of people who survived despite not knowing what truly hid in their daily meals. As the fire crackles softly in your imagination, and as we breathe slowly in this calm medieval kitchen, let us drift toward another part of their world, the strange, unexpected ingredients people used to make their food better, even when those ingredients were far from safe. Now, as you stay relaxed and your breathing settles into a slow rhythm, let us wander gently into another quiet corner of medieval life, a place where people used ingredients that today would surprise us, confuse us, or even frighten us, but back then felt completely normal. In a world without modern science, people trusted tradition above all else. If their grandparents did it, they did it too. If a village healer suggested something unusual, they accepted it quietly, without questioning. And so, many strange things found their way into medieval food. Imagine a small wooden table in a dimly lit kitchen. On it lies a bowl of broth, warm, simple, stretched thin, to feed a hungry family. Into this broth, the cook adds something unexpected, a handful of crushed eggshells, not for flavor, but because people believed it made the dish healthier, or stronger, or better for the stomach. The gritty pieces dissolved in the hot soup, leaving no trace, but adding a strange chalky texture that people accepted without complaint. In another village, a baker stirs ground bone into bread dough. Animal bones were burned until they turned powdery and black, then mixed into flour. When supplies ran low, it gave the bread a darker color and a faint smell of smoke, but it helped stretch the food through hard seasons. And then there were the spices, not the soft, fragrant spices you might imagine today, but sharp, bitter, overwhelming ones. When a piece of meat had begun to turn, when the smell hinted that something wasn't right, medieval cooks used heavy spices to bury the scent, to mask what they couldn't fix. Pepper, mustard seeds, strong herbs like thyme and sage, all piled on, hoping no one would notice. People believed the stew tasted rich. They didn't realize they were hiding signs of food that had passed its safe moment. Even more unusual ingredients found their place in medieval kitchens. Powdered charcoal was sometimes sprinkled on food to help the stomach. Wine thickened with tree sap was used as a sauce. And in some regions, fish was preserved with mud from riverbanks, packed tightly, left to dry, and scraped clean again before cooking. These were not strange to them. These were not shocking. These were simply the ways people survived. Imagine the calm acceptance of it. A mother stirring a pot, her face lit by a flickering oil lamp. A child waiting quietly at the table, hands folded, learning to be grateful for whatever appears in the bowl. A father quietly chewing food that tastes unfamiliar, but offering no complaint. Life was slower, harder, but also filled with a kind of patience that feels almost unreachable today. As the night around us grows softer, let your mind drift with the quietness of these small kitchens. their strange ingredients, and the gentle resilience of the people who trusted them. Let us now move to another part of medieval food life, the dangerous drinks that people relied on every single day. As you remain settled and peaceful, let us drift into another quiet chapter of medieval life, a chapter that rests not on food, but on what people drank every single day in a world without electricity, without plumbing, without clean running water. A simple cup of liquid could be dangerous. Streams carried dirt, wells gathered insects, and water left standing became cloudy, still, heavy with things the eye could not see. So medieval people, out of caution and habit, turned to drinks that today might seem unusual or even unsettling. Imagine a wooden table inside a small cottage. On the table sits a clay jug filled with what they called small ale, a weak beer, barely alcoholic, thin and pale. It wasn't brewed to taste good. It was brewed because it was safer than water. Even children drank it. Farm workers drank it with breakfast. Mothers poured it into bowls as casually as we pour milk. It had a sour bite, a cloudy color, and a yeasty smell that clung to the cup. But people accepted it quietly, gratefully, because it kept them alive. Wine wasn't much better. Stored in wooden barrels, it often turned sharp and vinegary. Some households mixed it with herbs to soften the bitterness. Others warmed it, hoping the heat would chase away strange flavors. Drinking a cup of wine back then was more like sipping a warm spiced medicine than relaxing with a glass of something pleasant. Even milk was risky. Without refrigeration, it spoiled quickly. A jug of milk, left on a shelf in a cool room, might last until sundown, or it might curdle. By midday, people often used it in cooking before it turned, mixing it into porridge or bread so the sourness wouldn't be noticed. And sometimes people drank things we would never imagine today. Warm broth, made from boiled bones and scraps, served as both drink and meal. Fermented grain water, barely filtered, filled cups in poor houses. Even cabbage water, the leftover liquid from boiling vegetables, was a common drink when nothing else was available. Picture a family sitting together after a long day. The father pours small ale into wooden cups. The mother sips warm spiced wine, and the children share broth, made from bones and herbs. No one complains. No one questions. This is simply life. And yet, there is something calming in this quiet acceptance. People did not expect luxury. They did not search for perfect taste. They simply wanted warmth, safety, and enough to fill the belly before night arrived. As you listen, let your mind drift to the gentle rhythm of these old routines. The slow pouring of ale, the soft bubbling of broth, the quiet sigh of a tired mother at the end of the day. This world was harsh, but it moved at a calm, measured pace that makes the modern world feel loud and hurried by comparison. And now, as the night deepens, let us walk softly into the next part of medieval food life, the dangers that waited in every kitchen and dining hall, often unnoticed, yet always present. As the night settles even more deeply around us, let us step quietly into another part of medieval food life, the hidden dangers that lived in every kitchen, every pot, every plate, and every feast. When we imagine medieval kitchens, we often picture warmth, firelight, and the smell of bread. But the truth was far less comforting. Kitchens were chaotic, smoky, and unpredictable places, and the food that came out of them often carried risks people simply accepted because they had no other choice. Imagine a long, low room, its stone walls blackened from years of smoke, with a single fire pit glowing at the center. Everything, meat, bread, vegetables, porridge, was cooked over this one open flame. There were no ovens with steady temperatures, no clean metal cookware, no regulated hygiene. The smoke clung to everything: clothing, hair, food, even the cooks themselves. The air tasted thick, dusty, and warm, and the food that simmered in those heavy pots absorbed all of it. Spoilage was one of the greatest threats, especially in warmer months. Without refrigeration, meat began to turn the moment it was butchered. Cuts of beef or pork hung from hooks exposed to insects, heat, and moisture. By the time it reached the pot, it might already carry a strange smell or a slimy surface. But medieval people, driven by hunger and necessity, often cooked it anyway. They boiled it for long hours, hoping the heat would make it safe, hoping the herbs would hide the taste. Illness was common, but they rarely blamed the food. They simply believed it was fate or bad luck, or the will of the world moving against them. Even bread could be dangerous. Rye, a common grain, sometimes grew toxic fungi in damp climates. These fungi, invisible and silent, caused hallucinations, burning sensations in the limbs, and terrible sickness. Whole villages suffered outbreaks without understanding the reason. People prayed, fearing curses or spirits, never realizing the soft, dark bread they ate every day was quietly harming them. But hunger doesn't leave room for caution, and so they continued slicing loaves, spreading them with lard or broth, never knowing that even something as simple as bread could become an unseen threat. Cooking tools made the situation worse. Pots were made of iron, bronze, or even lead. Lead cookware, especially in wealthier homes, gave food a smooth sweetness, but it also poisoned slowly, gently over years. No one knew why some families grew weak or developed strange pains. No one suspected the elegant dishes served at noble feasts, or the shiny pots admired in royal kitchens. The danger was hidden, silent, and impossible for them to detect. And still, despite all these risks, food was prepared with care, with patience, with a quiet devotion to survival. The kitchen, for all its hazards, was also a place of warmth. It was where families gathered, where children dozed near the hearth, where mothers stirred pots with slow, practiced hands, and where the evening settled with a soft, comforting glow. It is this balance, danger and comfort, uncertainty and routine, that defined medieval eating. And as you let this image rest gently in your mind, feel the softness of the firelight, the slow movement of time, the calm acceptance of a life shaped entirely by the simplest needs. Now, as the embers fade in that old kitchen, let us slowly move toward another part of medieval food life. The strange and surprising meals people ate on feast days, when poverty briefly gave way to abundance, and tables filled with dishes unlike anything seen on ordinary days. Feast days in the medieval world were moments when the ordinary rhythm of life paused, and even the poorest families felt a shift in the air, a soft excitement, like a promise. These feasts were tied to religious calendars, harvest cycles, victories, marriages, or the arrival of important guests. For people who lived most of the year on bread, thin broth, and whatever vegetables the season allowed, a feast was more than just a meal. It was a doorway into another world, a world filled with rare smells, unexpected colors, and tastes they might not encounter again for months. On feast days, kitchens transformed. Fires burned hotter, cooks moved faster, and the sound of chopping, boiling, and grinding echoed through the air as if the entire house awakened with purpose. The food prepared for these occasions could be astonishingly elaborate. Even a simple village feast had its own charm. A large pot of thick stew packed with vegetables and, if fortune allowed, a little meat, freshly baked loaves bigger than usual, honeyed pastries made from saved grains, and perhaps a jug of ale or weak wine. For a night, hunger softened its grip, and families ate with full hands rather than careful portions. In small rooms lit by candles and oil lamps, people laughed louder, spoke freely, and felt life stretch a little wider than usual. The warmth of the food seemed to travel through their bodies like comfort they had long forgotten. But noble feasts, those were a different universe entirely. If a commoner could have stepped into a castle hall on such a night, the sight alone might have seemed unreal. Imagine long wooden tables lined with dishes from end to end, each one surprising in its own way. There might be roasted boar, its skin crisp and glistening under candlelight, whole fish decorated with herbs and fruits, pigeons and quails stuffed with spices that had traveled across continents. Some dishes were crafted purely to amaze. Pies that released live birds when opened, towers of sweets shaped like castles or mythical creatures, and stews tinted with colors made from rare plants. Perfumed steam rose upward, mixing with the warm glow of countless torches. Music played softly in the background, flutes, harps, gentle drums, while servants moved swiftly through the hall, refilling cups and bringing more dishes than anyone could possibly finish. Nobles ate slowly, savoring every bite, while the poor workers in the kitchen allowed themselves only small tastes as they cooked. Yet even they felt a kind of awe. Food like this was a reminder of power, of wealth, of the unreachable world that existed alongside their own. And still, for just one night, they were part of the energy, the sound, the creation of something grand. These grand feasts, though beautiful, also carried their own shadows. Too much food meant waste, leftovers thrown aside, bones discarded, bread hardened before sunrise. And sometimes the rich ate so heavily and so quickly that illness followed, the weight of excess pressing down on their bodies. But even this risk did not lessen the spectacle. The desire to display wealth through food was a tradition that stretched across generations, each feast trying to outshine the one before it. As the night continued and the candles began to shorten, the feast hall slowly shifted from loud celebration to a softer, dreamier quiet. People leaned back in their seats, full and content, their voices dropping to murmurs. Outside, the air cooled, and the sounds of the village faded, while inside the great hall the last plates were cleared away, and musicians played gentle notes that drifted lazily through the warm air. It was in these final moments that the feeling of the feast settled deepest, the sense that life, even in its hardest seasons, still held moments of abundance and wonder. And as the hall emptied and the fires dimmed, the memory of the feast lingered like a warm breath on the cool night. As we move deeper into the quiet world of medieval food, it becomes impossible to ignore one of the most surprising truths of that era, the way people handled leftovers. Today, when food is stored carefully, wrapped tightly, and chilled in refrigerators, it's hard to imagine a time when cooling was a luxury and preservation was often improvised. Yet in the medieval world, leftovers were both a blessing and a danger. Families rarely had enough food to waste anything, but at the same time, they had very limited ways to keep their meals safe from spoilage. It created a strange balance where every leftover meal felt like a small risk wrapped in gratitude. Imagine a family finishing their evening meal, the fire glowing softly in the corner. Whatever remained, perhaps a strip of roasted turnip, a crust of bread, a ladle of stew, would be carefully set aside in cool corners of the home, often in clay pots, wooden boxes, or cloth-wrapped bundles. There were no airtight containers, no ice boxes, no modern safeguards. The night air itself was sometimes their only form of protection. In winter, this worked well. Leftovers could stay cool and fresh, lasting through the next day. But in summer, the warm air carried hidden dangers. Food spoiled quickly, and people often had no choice but to eat it anyway, hoping it was still safe. In bigger households, especially castles and manor homes, food storage had a slightly more advanced system. There were pantries built underground, stone-walled rooms that stayed naturally cool, and large barrels packed with salt to preserve meat and fish. Even then, spoilage happened often. The smell of sour milk, moldy bread, or turning meat was a familiar part of daily life. And rather than throw spoiled food away, many people simply tried to cook it again, boiling it until the bad scent softened. It wasn't foolproof, but hunger pushed people to take chances that modern stomachs could hardly tolerate. Leftover stew was a common dish in medieval homes, not because people loved its taste, but because it was practical. A pot of stew could be reheated day after day, with new ingredients thrown in whenever available. It might start with vegetables and bones, then gain a piece of meat, then a handful of barley, becoming a constantly changing meal that never fully emptied. Some families joked that their stew never died, because it lived on for weeks, evolving with every ingredient added. This practice was both clever and risky. The longer a stew stayed on the fire, the more chances bacteria had to grow when the pot cooled overnight. Yet many families depended on this never-ending stew as the backbone of their diet. Bread, too, was often reused in creative ways. Hard, stale loaves were softened in soup, soaked in ale, crushed into crumbs for thickening sauces, or fed to animals when they became too tough to chew. Nothing was wasted. People respected food in a way born from necessity, understanding that a small decision, like throwing away a crust, could mean the difference between eating and hunger in the days ahead. Despite these challenges, there was a certain quiet resilience in how medieval people dealt with leftovers. It was a rhythm of survival, a slow dance with nature, where people learned to stretch every resource to its limit. And as they worked with these fragile remains of meals, they developed a kind of intuition, sensing by sight, smell, and touch whether something was edible or dangerous. This simple, instinctive expertise became a hidden skill passed down through generations. At night, when the home grew quiet and families slipped into sleep, the leftover food rested nearby, covered, tucked away, waiting for the next day's fire to bring it back to life. It was a humble reminder of how people lived through uncertainty with patience and practicality, trusting that each meal, no matter how small or imperfect, was a gift to carry them forward. As the night drifts a little deeper and you remain settled, warm, and relaxed, let us move quietly into another part of medieval life, a part that often hides in the shadows of history. In those old centuries, food was not only hard, plain, or poorly cooked. Sometimes, the food itself was a danger. Not because it was poisoned by enemies, as dramatic stories usually claim, but because nature, time, and ignorance worked together in ways people could not see. You and I may take clean kitchens, safe water, and fresh ingredients for granted today, but imagine living in a world where none of these existed, and every meal carried a small, silent risk that nobody truly understood. Picture a loaf of medieval bread, heavy, dark, and thick. It may look simple, but hidden inside it could be something strange, something dangerous. Rye, which was used often in cold regions, could develop a fungus if the weather turned wet. People did not know what fungus was, and they certainly could not see it growing inside the grain. They simply ground the flour and baked the bread, believing it was normal. But when this fungal bread was eaten, it caused strange, frightening effects. Burning sensations in the limbs, hallucinations, uncontrollable shaking. Entire villages would feel it, all at once, never knowing the cause. And yet, the next season, they would eat the same bread again, because there was nothing else. Now imagine the dried fish hanging in a smoky kitchen. The smoke kept insects away, but it could not remove every harmful thing. Fish might be left too long, becoming sour and unsafe. Yet people still ate it because hunger was stronger than hesitation. A poor family had no choice. They ate what remained and hoped for the best. If illness followed, they assumed it was fate or God or perhaps the weather, never realizing the food itself was quietly responsible. It was a world without labels, without expiration dates, without warnings, only instincts, and instincts often failed. Even water, the simplest thing we drink today without a second thought, was a hidden danger. Wells could be contaminated by animals, dirt, or waste. Streams that looked crystal clear could carry sickness from a village upstream. But medieval people did not know this. They drank it anyway because they had to. Many used ale or weak beer instead, not because they wanted to feel good, but because alcohol made it safer than plain water. So children, even small ones, drank diluted beer daily, not for celebration, but for survival. Think now about meat. Fresh meat was rare and it spoiled quickly. In the warmth of summer, it could go bad within a single day. Without refrigeration, families used salt. Thick, heavy layers of salt that preserved the meat but made it incredibly tough and dry. Even then, the preservation wasn't always perfect. A piece might rot from the inside out, and they would never know until it was too late. But medieval cooks scraped, washed, boiled, and prayed it would be safe. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. As you breathe softly and settle deeper into calm, imagine how people navigated this uncertainty with quiet acceptance. Medieval life was slow, simple, and often peaceful. But the food they ate carried risks they could neither detect nor avoid. And so, they lived with it, moving through seasons, harvests, and shortages with patience. Illness came and went. Weakness stayed, and people continued eating the same way, because it was all they knew. In the glow of candlelight, a mother stirred a pot of stew, not realizing the water was unsafe. A baker kneaded dough, unaware that the flour carried hidden toxins. A fisherman salted his catch, hoping to feed his family but unable to prevent spoilage. There was no malice, no intention, only the quiet, unseen hazards of a world where knowledge was limited and survival was daily work. And as we slowly reach the end of this section, let your mind remain relaxed and quiet, drifting gently with the soft rhythm of this old world. The dangers were real, but they moved silently, unnoticed, blending into the rhythm of medieval life. And now, with the night settling around us, we will move forward soon, into yet another layer of life in those distant, dim centuries. As you settle a little deeper, letting your breath fall into a slow and gentle rhythm, let us drift quietly into another part of medieval life, a part that seems simple on the surface, yet carried its own silent struggles. In the modern world, we open a fridge and find clean water, cool juices, fresh milk, and endless choices. But in medieval times, drinks were far from refreshing. They were often strange, uncomfortable, or simply unpleasant, and people accepted them without complaint because there was no other way to live. Imagine walking through a medieval village on a warm afternoon. The sun is soft, the air smells of earth and wood, and you feel thirsty. But clean water is rare. A nearby stream might look beautiful, glistening in the light, yet it could be carrying waste from animals or homes upstream. Medieval people did not know about bacteria or contamination. They simply drank the water they had, never realizing why they fell ill later. And so, drinking water became a quiet gamble, a risk taken every day without understanding it. To avoid sickness, many families turned to ale. Not the strong ale we imagine today, but a weak, cloudy drink made from grain. It tasted sour, earthy, slightly bitter, and not exactly pleasant. But it was safer than water because the brewing process cleaned it in ways they never understood. Children drank it. Elderly people drank it. Even monks consumed it daily, not for enjoyment, but for survival. So, imagine a child sitting at a wooden table sipping from a small cup of weak ale, not because it was fun, but because it was the only safe drink they had known since birth. Milk, too, was complicated. Fresh milk spoiled quickly, especially during warm months. If a cow was sick, the milk could carry illness. If it was not kept cool, it turned sour by midday. Most medieval people could not store milk safely, so they sometimes boiled it or turned it into butter and cheese immediately to avoid waste. But drinking milk straight? That was a rare luxury, and one that could easily go wrong. Many children grew up never tasting fresh milk at all. Wine existed, of course, but only for the wealthy. And even that wine was not smooth or elegant like the bottles we know today. Medieval wine was sharp, often gritty, sometimes too sour, sometimes too sweet. If stored poorly, it turned into vinegar. If the barrel leaked, the wine spoiled. But nobility accepted it as normal, just as peasants accepted ale. Everyone learned to live with drinks that were far from perfect, because that was simply the world they were born into. Now picture a medieval kitchen, dark, warm, lit by a faint orange glow from a fire. Clay cups sit on a rough wooden shelf. A jug of ale rests near the hearth. A bucket of water is drawn from the well, not with confidence, but with quiet hope. A mother pours some for her children, wishing it will be gentle tonight. She has no chemical tests, no filters, no boiling advice from doctors. Only instinct, and instinct is often wrong. Yet the family drinks, because thirst does not wait for safety. In monasteries, monks prepared a drink called posset, a soft mixture of warm milk and ale. It was meant to soothe the sick. But imagine how unusual it must have tasted. Thick, warm, slightly curdled. And yet, for people of that age, it was comforting. It was medicine. It was all they had. Every sip carried the flavor of a world still learning, still discovering, still trying to survive with simple tools and limited knowledge. As your body relaxes deeper into the quiet of the night, think of how medieval people lived in constant acceptance. Their drinks were rough, sour, uncertain, yet they welcomed them with calm hearts. They did not expect sweetness. They did not demand perfection. They simply lived with what nature offered, adjusting, enduring, continuing with gentle patience. And as we reach the quiet end of this part, let your mind drift peacefully. Medieval life had its struggles, but it also had a rhythm, slow, soft, steady. A rhythm that carried people through the years, just as the calmness of this narration carries you deeper into rest. As your breathing grows softer, let us drift into another gentle corner of medieval life, a place where patience was not just a virtue, but a daily necessity. Tonight, imagine stepping into a medieval kitchen long before the idea of stoves, fridges, timers, or electricity existed. Meals were not simply made, they were earned through long, slow, exhausting effort, and every bite carried the weight of hours of quiet labor. Picture the kitchen of an ordinary village home. There is no metal stove glowing warm. Instead, a simple fire crackles at the center, surrounded by stones blackened from years of smoke. The air is thick and heavy, carrying the scent of burning wood and old pots. A woman bends over the fire, her face warm from the heat, her hands tired from grinding grain since dawn. There is no quick breakfast here. There is only the rising sun, the fire, and work that never rushes, never ends. Imagine her grinding wheat on a stone slab. The grain must be crushed again and again, slowly, patiently, until it becomes coarse flour. Her arms ache. The grinding stone is heavy, but there is no alternative. Without this, there is no bread. And without bread, the family has nothing filling to eat. She works silently, the sound of stone rubbing against stone becoming the background rhythm of her life. Each stroke takes strength. Each handful of flour takes time. And she knows she must do it all again tomorrow. Boiling water takes longer because the fire must be coaxed patiently. Too weak and nothing cooks. Too strong and the pot burns. There are no gas knobs to control the heat, no metal pots with perfect shapes. Everything is rough, uneven, handmade. A pot hangs from a wooden hook, swaying gently in the heat. It takes nearly an hour just to warm water enough to cook simple porridge. And even then, the cook must sit close, stirring carefully with a wooden spoon to keep the meal from burning at the bottom. Roasting meat is even slower. Imagine a piece of meat on a spit. A child or servant must sit beside it, slowly turning it for hours. One wrong moment, and the meat scorches. One distraction, and the fire flares up. The child's hands grow tired, their eyes feel heavy, but they keep turning because dinner depends on their rhythm. There is no escape, no shortcut, no machine to help. Only time, patience, and the deep desire to eat something warm at the day's end. And bread, the heart of medieval food, takes nearly half the day. First the grinding of grain, then mixing the dough, then waiting for it to rise in the cool air, then baking it in a clay oven heated with carefully arranged wood. The oven itself must be warmed hours before baking. If the heat is wrong, the bread stays raw inside or burns outside. So, imagine a woman placing her hand near the oven opening, guessing the temperature by feeling the warmth. She does not know degrees or measurements. She just trusts experience passed down from mother to daughter. There is a calm rhythm to it, though, a quiet acceptance. Medieval families did not complain that food took too long. They had never known convenience. They only knew the beauty of slow work and the patience of time. As you imagine this, let a peaceful heaviness settle inside you. Feel the slow pace of their world blending with your breathing. Soft, steady, unhurried. In noble households, kitchens were bigger but just as slow. Cooks managed dozens of dishes, each requiring its own careful steps. Spices had to be crushed with stone mortars, vegetables washed one by one, fish gutted by hand. Nothing was prepared earlier, nothing frozen, nothing stored neatly in sealed jars with labels. Everything was fresh, raw, and alive. And so every meal became a small journey, one that took hours, sometimes the entire day, just to reach the table. Imagine a cook kneeling beside a fire at dusk, the embers glowing orange. She feels tired, but there is a gentle calm in the work. She has fed her family. She has done what her ancestors did for centuries. The slowness is not a burden to her. It is simply life. A life built around firelight, patience, and the quiet understanding that good things take time. Let this slowness soothe you now. In a world where everything rushed, medieval kitchens moved like deep, steady breathing. And as you sink deeper into relaxation, let that rhythm surround you. Steady, warm, ancient. As we move deeper into the quiet world of medieval kitchens, let the night grow softer around you. Let your body settle, your shoulders loosen, and your breath take on that peaceful rhythm that comes when the mind begins to drift. Now imagine sitting inside a simple home in the Middle Ages, watching a meal being prepared with care, yet knowing that no matter how hard the cook worked, something unexpected always found its way into the food. Picture the open hearth first. A fire burns on the ground, not inside a neat modern stove, but on bare stone. The air is filled with smoke, drifting lazily upward, settling on the wooden beams, mixing with the smell of herbs and boiling grains. As the cook stirs a pot hanging over the flames, tiny pieces of ash float through the air. They move like slow, gray snowflakes, landing quietly on the food, on the bowls, even on the bread dough waiting patiently nearby. No one brushes them away. No one complains. Ash is simply part of life, part of every meal. Imagine dust settling through the cracks of an old wooden roof. Rooms are not sealed like ours today. On windy days, a soft layer of dust sprinkles over everything. The table, the floor, the fresh vegetables, even the water jugs. The cook wipes what she can, but some dust always stays. When she kneads dough, the flour, dust, and ash mix together without any fuss. People don't notice it anymore. Their tongues have grown used to the earthiness of food touched by the world around them. Now picture the grain stores. When wheat or barley was harvested, it was tied in bundles and stored in wooden barns. But barns were never perfect. Tiny insects, Weevils, beetles, little worms lived inside the grain, sometimes eating it from the inside, turning the flour coarse and speckled. Medieval people sifted the grain, but they could never remove every insect. Many tiny creatures were baked right into bread or boiled into porridge. They provided a little extra protein, though no one said that out loud. Let your mind drift to a small cottage where food is kept in baskets and jars. There are no refrigerators, no sealed plastic boxes, just clay pots, wooden lids, cloth covers. A mouse sometimes slips inside during the night, leaving droppings behind. A fly lands on leftover stew. A small lizard hides under a basket of dates. Morning comes, and the cook checks everything, brushing things off, removing what she can. But perfection is impossible. Food is simply food, touched by nature, touched by life itself. Picture the fire again. The wood crackles, sending sparks into the pot. Sometimes bits of burnt wood fall in. Sometimes the pot is too close and the food tastes smoky, even bitter. Sometimes the cook must stir quickly to stop the meal from blackening at the bottom. But one wrong moment, one sudden distraction, and the stew burns anyway. And still, the family eats it, grateful for warmth and fullness. A little char is normal. A little bitterness is expected. Even in noble kitchens, grand echoing rooms with dozens of servants, the same problems drift quietly through the air. The fire is bigger, the pots heavier, the tables longer. But ash still floats everywhere. Rats sneak through storage rooms. Insects hide in flour sacks. Water is carried from rivers or wells and is never completely clean. No matter how grand the palace, nature finds its way into the food. Even kings tasted grit between their teeth. As you imagine all this, let a strange calm wrap around you. Medieval life was imperfect, but people accepted those imperfections without stress. They did not panic over a bit of dirt or a stray insect. The world moved at its own pace, and people simply moved with it. Their meals tasted like smoke, earth, wood, and sometimes like the unexpected guests that shared their homes. Let this acceptance soothe you, the knowing that life does not have to be perfect to be peaceful. Even in the quiet kitchens of the past, meals were touched by ash, dust, and tiny creatures. Yet families still gathered around fires, sharing food with soft conversations and warm silence. Allow that warmth to settle inside you, breathing in slowly, drifting deeper, feeling the old world blend gently with your rest. As we move gently into the next chapter of this sleepy journey, imagine yourself drifting through a large medieval hall. The fire glows softly in the center, sending warm light across rough wooden tables. Servants move slowly, carrying trays of bread, meat, and jugs filled with ale. The air is heavy with the smell of roasting animals, warm spices, and the quiet murmur of hungry guests. Everything looks festive. Yet behind this calm scene hides another truth. In the Middle Ages, eating was not always safe. Many dangers lived inside the food, waiting silently, unnoticed by the people of the time. Imagine first the great feasts. The tables are long, the benches crowded, people laughing softly as they tear chunks of bread and dip them into broth. But the meat placed before them often comes with risks. It might be undercooked because the fire burns unevenly. The outer layer looks brown and crisp, but the inside remains raw, warm, but not safe. People cannot see it clearly in the dim candlelight. They eat it anyway, trusting the cooks. Tomorrow, many of them will feel a twisting pain in their stomachs, yet they will never know why. Picture a pot of stew sitting near the flames. It has been cooking since morning, thick and bubbling. The cook adds vegetables, herbs, and leftover meat from last night. Nothing is wasted, not even scraps that have begun to spoil. There is no concept of freshness the way we understand it today. Food is precious. If a smell is slightly off, people simply boil it longer, hoping heat will chase the danger away. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it does not. Let yourself wander deeper into this hall, where platters of fish rest on the table. Fresh fish is rare unless you live by the sea. Most fish is salted and dried, stored for months in wooden barrels. When the cook opens the barrel, the smell is sharp, salty, almost overwhelming. She soaks the fish in water to soften it, but the taste remains strong, sometimes bitter, sometimes sour. If the fish has spoiled beneath the salt, it is hard to tell. People eat it anyway because hunger is stronger than caution. Imagine cheese, thick and pale, sitting on a wooden board. It is made without modern cleanliness. Sometimes it grows molds not meant for eating. Sometimes insects burrow into soft cheese, leaving tiny tunnels. But medieval families simply cut around the worst parts, keeping what they can. They do not throw food away. Waste is a luxury only the wealthy could afford. Now picture sweet treats. Honey cakes, dried fruit, pastries made for special occasions. They look harmless and comforting. But even here, danger hides. Honey can contain dirt and small insects because it is scraped from natural hives with bare hands. Dried fruit is left in the open air to shrink in the sun, touched by dust, flies, and birds. When people eat it, they taste sweetness mixed with the wild world surrounding it. Let your thoughts drift toward the water jugs. At feasts, people drink ale or wine because water is almost never clean. Water from rivers and wells carries sickness. Even when it looks clear, it hides invisible dangers. Drinking it can make people weak for days. Still, sometimes the ale runs out and servants must bring water anyway. People drink it with hope and pray they wake up the next morning feeling well. Now, as the hall grows quieter, imagine men and women eating fast, talking, sharing wooden plates. But no one washes hands with soap. No one cleans knives properly. Food touches surfaces that are worn, splintered, and never truly clean. Bacteria, though unknown to them, travels from hand to hand, dish to dish, without anyone noticing. And yet, despite all this, medieval people sit together eating with soft laughter, sharing stories of their day. Danger is always present, hidden in every bite, but life continues peacefully. They do not fear what they do not understand. They simply enjoy their meal, trusting in luck, fire, and faith. The hall glows warmly, and for a moment, everything feels safe, even if it is not. Let this old, quiet world wrap around you gently. Let the sounds of crackling fire and distant chatter settle you deeper into rest. The people of the past lived with uncertainty, yet their hearts stayed calm. May their simple acceptance help you release your worries tonight